Okay, we're here to interview Grace Amemiya, who has a great story about the internment of Japanese American citizens at World War II. And we'd like to ask first, Grace, if it's all right that we interview you and if we can share this with the public. We're with the Ames Historical Society.
Thank you very much. I feel honored to be asked to do this, and I feel that it is a story that should be heard by everyone so that the effect never happens again to any other group.
We hope the same thing, yes.
Where were you born?
Okay, we'd like to start first with your parents. Where did they come from?
My mother and father came from Japan over 100 years ago, and they settled in California, and so all 6 of us were born in California. 1 sister and 4 brothers. 1 boy died in infancy, and then I was the baby of the family. My father was educated as a home economics teacher. I beg your pardon, my mother was a middle school home economics teacher, and my father was educated as a lawyer in Japan.
Why did they leave Japan?
100 years ago.
Why?
Why? Well, I think that they thought that, I think many of the immigrants that come from other countries feel that they're going to come and make a good income and possibly go back to their country. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I never had an opportunity to ask my parents why.
Yes.
But I'm so glad they did.
When were you born?
And you were born when then?
I was born 90 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was the youngest, as I said, of children. And my father died unexpectedly when he was 50 years old, when I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a picture here of,
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
this is your mother and father.
Yes, that my mother and father, they're from northern Japan,
Mhm.
and that was when they came to America at that time. And this is in 1930, the family, and my dad and my mother, my oldest sister, and my 3 brothers, and then I was 10 years old
Mhm.
at that time. And that goes into the.
Okay, so
Oh.
you were an American citizen then because you were born in
That's
America.
right. We were all born citizens, American citizens, and in fact, when I think about it, it was just sort of taken for granted that we were American citizens because we were born here, even if our parents were from a different country.
Okay, before the war started then, and this is the Second World War, was there any discrimination between Japanese and other races, or?
We weren't as aware of it until it became prevalent after the war was
After the
declared.
bombing.
Yes,
Mhm.
but we felt very privileged that we were accepted by the community and by the schools, and didn't feel whatever happened as a discrimination. And when you think back why so many of the things were done just amongst the Japanese or amongst the Japanese Americans and all, but was that, normal, or we didn't
Right.
consider it as a
Right.
discrimination.
What was your hometown then in California?
My hometown was Vacaville, and that was between Sacramento and Berkeley area.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Were there other nationalities in the area, or was it just?
Yes, it was, we had, Vacaville was started by a Spanish Mexican type of a community,
Mhm.
Vaca, of course, being of that. And also, but we did not have any, I don't recall any black families, but there were people that were working there who were, of course, Japanese, Chinese, and Filipinos. And
Mexican?
I feel that, and then of course a lot of the out-of-staters that came in because it was a farming community.
Mhm. What was do you remember what the crops were around there?
Well, when school ended, we started out with the apricots and the peaches and the pears and the plums and the prunes and until school started in August, and that was near the pear
Where did you
season.
go to school?
So you went to school in Vacaville.
Yes, we all went to elementary and high school in Vacaville.
Mhm.
And our parents had stressed so much that education was the most important thing,
Mhm.
that if anyone wanted to go ahead in this world. And so we all went out and worked for 25 cents an hour and whatever to save our money. But we were a very modest means because citizenship was denied to our parents, and also the fact that they didn't have a job per se, or a profession.
Mhm.
But my mother did teach language, Japanese language school, and since she was a home economics person, she taught others how to sew and cook, and also did alterations and made clothing for people that.
So you spoke Japanese also?
Yes, because that was what our parents spoke.
Mhm.
But I feel that since I was the last of the family, that maybe we as kids were speaking less Japanese than maybe my sister, who was 10 years older than I was, and the firstborn.
Okay,
Nursing.
so after you graduated from high school, you went into nursing training?
Yes, I I graduated from high school in 1938, and I had the privilege of being the valedictorian at that time, and also, of course, I was happier with the fact that I had the highest award in the Girls Athletic Association, because I was quite a tomboy and enjoyed sports so very much.
Okay, what sports would you have played?
Field hockey, tennis, volleyball, basketball.
Basketball then?
Yes. We didn't have any soccer then at that time, though. But I was unhappy because they wouldn't let girls play football.
Was basketball then 3-on-3?
No, it was a three-court,
Mm-hmm.
and then it became two-court.
Uh-huh. Okay. And this is a picture then of your class? Your
Yes,
nursing?
this was
Can you
University
hold
of
that up?
California. Yes, I'm sorry. This is before Pearl Harbor. I had one brother who was in the military, and that's my brother Ted, and he was in junior college, and also the fact that it was selective service at that time, and you had a number, and if your number came up, you had to be in the military for a specific time.
Mhm.
And so he thought that since his number was so close to coming up, that he would get that over with and then finish his training. But his time would have been up in January, but since Pearl Harbor happened December, he was in Monterey, California, training as a machine gunner.
Mhm.
At that time.
So he stayed in, he was
So,
not
yes.
pulled out because he was
No.
Japanese?
No, but the thing was that Japanese American soldiers who were in Army hospitals out in California, in the areas that we had to be evacuated from, they also were evacuated and put into military camps inland. And he was in either Michigan or Illinois. But when they transferred him, they would not let him train as a machine gunner. They put him in the office to file
Mhm.
until the government needed soldiers. And then he went overseas to Italy
Mhm.
with the 442 as a machine gunner.
But he made it back safely?
I beg your pardon?
He came back safely?
Yes. Fortunately, but he was over in Europe. He was in the military for
Mhm.
5 years.
Mhm. Okay, then this is your class of
Yes,
students?
I was going to University of California in Berkeley, and this is when I was a student nurse at the University of California.
And this is you right here?
Yes,
Mhm.
and also when I was over in Berkeley is where I met Min, who was amongst our friends, but
Mhm.
we had kept up a friendship that ended up very nicely.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Okay, so what do we have here then?
And I'm still in touch with her, in fact.
Mhm.
And so then, while we were this then happened, that December 7th happened,
Mhm.
and I was in her room studying that Sunday morning, and there was no television in those days, it was through the radio that the music stopped, and they said that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor.
What was the Japanese reaction from your community then?
Japanese, I wasn't in Vacaville, hometown and all, but we as Japanese Americans felt that the enemies had bombed Pearl Harbor, even if the fact, that our parents had come from Japan. But we didn't think of that as Japan parents,
You didn't think of yourself as Japanese, you thought of yourself as an American.
Yes, American citizen. Yes. And so that is what had happened. And of course, it was just that immediately they said we had to be in our homes from 8 at night to 6 in the morning, and also that we could only travel within 5 miles from our home. And that, so we, like I was in San Francisco, so I had to quit my training. And a lot of the people lost their jobs and all had to be at home. And if you had evening jobs, why, you couldn't be out at night.
Were you allowed to keep any guns you might have had then?
No, then the orders came through that we had to turn in cameras, guns of any form, and even some things like some areas, long bladed knives, because they thought that it could be used as a weapon. But also they felt that we might be saboteurs who were taking pictures to help Japan, or would have guns to use as weapons. And that was why they did take away from us all those things.
So cameras and shortwave radios probably too then?
Radios and cameras we had to turn in. And in fact, we were not even able to supposedly take them to the camps with us because they took it from us.
Was there a distinction made between full-blooded Japanese and Japanese American, or?
Well, when we were told that they were registering us, that if we had even 1/16 of Japanese blood in us, we were considered enemy aliens and non-citizens.
I think the 1/16 was the same rule they used for deciding if you were a colored person or not.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and Indian the same way. Yeah.
So,
How silly.
well, that was the criteria that we were involved
Right.
in.
And then came the executive order.
Yes,
Can you tell us about that?
The executive order 9066, as it said, was a fact about the internment. And the orders was saying that we were going to be taken and put into camps at that time.
Okay. Can you hold this one up so
Surely.
that we can get that?
Yes, and it was by Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Okay,
February.
if we turn it this way, does that work? Okay. Okay, so the
Well, the Executive Order 9066 is something that covered not just the Japanese and the Japanese Americans, but it included the Germans and the Italians, because we were at war with Germany and Italy. But when you look at the fact that you look at a Caucasian face, you don't know whether they have German blood or Irish blood or Scottish blood or all. And of course, the Italians have that privilege too. And so the government felt that they were not able to locate and definitely, but like out in California at that time, it was mostly Chinese or Japanese Americans there. And so the Chinese started wearing buttons that said, "I am Chinese" or "Chinese American," because the police were stopping any Asian-faced person thinking they might be Japanese or Japanese American that maybe were trying to escape going to camp. And so this is something that I feel it's very important to have the German and the Italians realize that they too were at war with the United States at that time.
Right.
And that's the way it was. But it's just something, but the military favored the evacuation of the Japanese and the Japanese Americans at that time from the states in the Pacific coast, and of course that was California, parts of Oregon, Washington, and Arizona. And it was something that they said, well, you could voluntarily leave out of this area and get out of going to camp. But when you figure that that was our home, and a lot of us, we couldn't afford to move, we had no place to go. And I must admit, in those days when we didn't think about inland states. California was where we were. And so this is something that then we got the discriminatory things of no Japs allowed, Japs stay out, Japs keep moving, and all those things. And it was something that was truly hateful and hurtful things that were being said by us at that time. But there were some that did disobey and said they would not go, and they were put into federal camps, but later were cleared at that time. But we had to leave our homes, our properties, and everything, and all that we could take with us was what we could carry. And so most of it was in 2 suitcases. And of course, at that time, suitcases did not have wheels, and it was something that we had to carry on our time.
How many were able to actually sell their homes?
Well, like us, we were of very modest means. My father had died, my mother was trying to keep the family together. We were working and trying to, we lived in homes that the, no bath inside the home we had, and the toilets were outdoor johns and things like that. Also, we rented and all, and it was something that the farmers were living on farms, and it was something that not many were prosperous Japanese, except for the business people, possibly, and then those people who were picked up immediately were like people who were business people in newspaper groups, teachers who were teaching Japanese language, and my mother was one of those. And all the teachers that she was teaching with were immediately picked up by the government, but my mother was not, and we often wondered why that was, because we lived in the town, and I honestly felt that maybe it was because we used to live across the street from the chief of police and his kids, and we all played, they knew us as loyal American citizens, I believe. But if my father had been alive, he most likely would have been immediately put into federal camp also.
So if you couldn't sell the home, you would just have to walk away from it
And we had to destroy everything that we had, or give it away, or if you wanted to sell. We sold our car for $25, and we had to clean out the rental place, and we gave toys and games and things to families that we used to be very close to, and but all we could keep was what we were able to carry with us, except that some, like our church said, a Methodist church, it was a Japanese Methodist church, and they said, upstairs is empty, so if you have things that you want us to take care of for you, we will be glad to do it, so pack it up, bring it to the church, and we'll take care of it. Well, unfortunately, as they had said, when you come back, but before we were able to get back after we were freed, I should say freed, but anyway, everything had been vandalized, and the things that we had specifically kept in these boxes were maybe not of monetary value, but historical values, or memorials and all, and those were lost forever. And this was very sad, because a lot of the things that I don't have of the first 21 years of my life, and all of us. So we sort of have a blank spot
Yeah.
and some of the things, you know.
And that's so unnecessary for people to do that. Yeah.
But they did it, you know.
Just
and
mean.
Homes were burned, you know, destroyed.
How would you decide what to take then if you have 2 suitcases? I wouldn't know where to begin.
Well, when I give talks and I'm asked that, they said, what did you take? And I said, well, we had to take clothes. We didn't know whether we were going north or south. We didn't know whether the government was going to put us on ships and send us to another country. We didn't know where we were going. And was it up north, hot south, or cold north? And for how long? And the more I thought about it, I couldn't remember. But we had to take our own dishes and our silverware because the government said you had to have these things. And also the fact that we said, if you want beddings, put them in a duffel bag, and the government said they would transfer those to the camp for us so that we wouldn't have to carry those. But all we could take was the 2 suitcases.
Mhm.
And of course, I worked in camp as a student nurse, because since I was a nurse, and so I was in uniform the whole time, mostly, you know. But all I could remember is being in slacks. So I don't even remember taking clothes, you know. I mean, dress clothes and things like that.
That probably would not have been a priority
No.
for dress clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the life had to go on in camps, and we had, you know, religious, social, and sports for this, and school, especially schooling, because they felt that that was very, very important, that the schools be kept up so that the kids could go on to high school and get through with their education.
Okay, how were you transported to camp then?
There was, of course, excuse me, in April then, they had the civilian exclusion order, and this was the order and this toll of what we were to take with us and everything, and and then we were put into buses, and they found that there was a definite date that we were to leave, but the camps were not ready. So they had to put us into temporary quarters. And so that is how we ended up being at a county fairgrounds. And like Min's family lived in San Francisco, and they were sent to Tanforan racetrack. They took the horses out of the horse stalls, whitewashed the walls, and were put into, each family was put into a horse stall. And they were, some said that even the floors had not been swept. But I know that after we were married, my husband said to me, he says, honey, he says, did you know that you had to be a white horse to be a racehorse? And I said, why do you say that? And he said, well, we used to pull out hairs from the cracks of our horse stalls, and they were all white, you know. Of course, the government had whitewashed the walls, you know. But we had a good laugh about that at that time. No. But anyway, we had to take our linens and everything. But it's truly hard to say what we were supposed to be taking, you know. But these were the things that we had to, though our bus took us to our fairgrounds. Everything we carried had to be opened and checked again. And then, of course, we were eating at, we were put into the facilities that were really made for the military, not for families and all that and all. And there were, in barracks, they were by 20 by 20 because there were 6 barracks in each building. And then the upper parts, of course, were open so you could hear everything that was going on. And so that you heard laughters and angry words and conversations and all. We had bed checks morning and night.
Just like the military.
Right. Yeah. But we had to keep the kids happy. We had to be fed. We went to the mess halls to eat.
Mm-hmm.
We had to stand it. We had to have our dishes and our own silverware. Our barrack rooms only had cot beds and mattresses. Some didn't even have mattresses, they had mattress bags, and you went out and filled them with straw that they had outside of the buildings if you wanted to have a mattress. No chairs to sit on, no showers, no water indoors, no toilets. All there was were the barracks.
Now, this is after you got to the camp?
Into the camp.
Into the camp,
Mhm.
okay.
I might mention the fact that when we registered to be sent to camp, we were given a number. And also then, all of us had to wear these tags. And this is is really what we had. But I put, my family name was Obata, but we became family, 6251. And I think that you'll notice that in the picture of this, as this family is shown wearing the tags on everything they carried and everything, and we had to wear it on the outside. And I was able to get these because now those who are out of camp have gotten copies of these made, and they're putting the names of all the Japanese Americans that were put into camp, and each camp is making a tag for every person that was in camp and hanging them like a tree decoration. And I think they said they've already done 3 of them. But when you figure that there are like 10,000 in the camp, why?
Where are those trees then?
Well, they are trying to put them into museums.
Into museums?
Yes.
huh?
And my friend, who was a cadet nurse with me, she was one of the volunteers of her camp, and she was given a list of names, and she had to write the names on, and then they would put the ID numbers, and then they put them in tea and soaked them in tea water so they would look like they were aged. But she says, I thought you'd like to have one, and so she had sent me this.
Oh, that's nice.
And so
Yeah.
I'm so happy that she did, because
Mhm.
this is truly exactly what we
Yeah.
had on
Yeah.
us at that time.
Describe the camps.
And also, I might say that the census was that there was about 126,000 Japanese or Japanese Americans that were living in the United States, and 70% of us were citizens, Japanese Americans, so Americans, citizens at that time. And there was about 50,000 immigrants from Japan here at that time. And the evacuation involved about 120,000 of us, and it did cost about $88 million of taxpayers' money.
And they never found any of those people to be guilty of anything, did they?
No. So that's the way it was. But we were sent to Gila, Arizona. And so it was a camp that we were on the Indian reservation, and the camps were mostly, these barracks were made and all. As I said, we were on an Indian reservation near Phoenix, Arizona. And if you can imagine that going in August to a 20 by 20 room, no inside water, no curtains, no toilet, no shower.
And certainly no air conditioning.
Of course, no air conditioning.
Yeah.
And all. And subject to dust storms,
One light bulb.
one light bulb, that's all. And of course, when it's time to eat, we had to get in line and eat, and this is the way it was. But we just tried to do the best we could, and all. And this is something that we were from our camp in California. Of course, they had to put us on trains, and we were transported in these antiquated trains because the troop trains were being used for the good ones and all. And the MPs guarded us with rifles and all in these camps. And the shades were drawn in these trains from all the way from California to Arizona. And we said, why were the shades drawn? so you all couldn't see us, or so we couldn't see where we were being sent. And the government never was able to give us an answer on that at all. And so that's the way it was for us. But you know, we really had to do the best we could. And the camp was not completed when we got there in August. So there we were, if you can imagine, over 10,000 men, women, and children surrounded by barbed wire fence and a number of these sentry towers, and they had machine gunners and all these. And so there they were. And some said, well, we were put into camp for our protection. And we said, if it was for our protection, why were the machine guns pointed at us inwardly 24 hours a day? And spotlights put on us all night long and behind our fence and all. And so that's the way it was. Of course, there were dust storms and all, like this recently we had out in there. So anyway, when you figure though that you in a camp like this, like I had 2 brothers, and my mom and my sister and I, no privacy. And so when you have a shower, you had to go to the shower, and all their shower barrack would be with shower heads. No curtains, no partitions. If you wanted to go take a shower, you took a shower. If there were 6 people in there, you took a shower along with them. If you wanted to go to the bathroom, rows back-to-back toilet seats, no compartments or no curtains or anything. So if you had to go to the bathroom, you went to the bathroom, did what you had to do, stay high and go on with your business.
Did they separate by men and women, or was it all mixed?
No, it was men and women separately.
Okay.
You know. But still, it was, and some of the older people were so embarrassed that they would wait till nighttime to go take their showers or things like that. But it was, we who were younger were more used to it, you know, so it was like when you're at school and things. But it was very, very hard for the older folks at that time. Well, anyway, but they said it cost about 35 cents a day to feed us. And we had to eat whatever. But everything that was done in camp, we had to work for it. And like, you know, we were, the thing that was that the doctors and the lawyers and the professional people maybe were making $18 a month, you know, working 40 hours a week. We were considered semi-pros as nurses, and we got $12 a month for working maybe. And those that were just civilian workers were maybe $8 a month. But we always laughingly said, well, we did get free board and room along with all of it.
Yeah.
So that was the way it was. But you know, it was just really, and then the fact that there were over 3,000 school-age children in each camp, and they had to be educated. But the government didn't give us many teachers, so all the college students helped out with the teaching, plus volunteers. And also, it was amazing that some churches from outside the camp sent in volunteers to help us. And then many of the students wrote back to their teachers, and the teachers so graciously sent things to help them with things like that, with books and supplies that they weren't using at that time.
Since your mother was a teacher, did she teach there too then?
No, you were not supposed to teach Japanese.
No, but she also, no, it was your dad who was a home ec.
No, my mother was a home economic. My father was
Okay.
educated as a lawyer.
Lawyer.
But he was passed away. He never went to camp.
He didn't go to camp, that's right. Yeah.
No, but to make our homes more homey, why, you know, they made curtains out of towels and sheets and bartered with each other and tried to make it as comfortable as possible, and it was just that's all we had was a bed to sit on. That's all. And so my brother put a rope across the room, and then during the day they'd hang the sheets and the blankets on, so we just could have a little bit of privacy amongst them at that time. And
Could you describe what the members of your family did during the day while they were in camp?
Well, in my family, it was my two brothers that were in camp with me, and both college graduates, and my sister, who was working, she was in college also, and she had come home after 2 years. My father passed away, and being the oldest of the family, why she helped Mom keep us together and help with the family work. But we're in camp, why she worked in the office, and my brother Ben and my brother George both worked in the offices there. There was business things to be done. They had to have so much paperwork for all the evacuees and things like that. I worked, like I said, as a nurse at the hospital, and we took care of the patients, and if they were found to be having tuberculosis or something, we sent them out of camp to tuberculosis camps and things. But we had surgery and things like that. We had to, as nurses, we had to be very, very careful about some of the elderly people because they were depressed. They had lost everything that they thought they had and didn't know where they would go afterwards and all. And so we were told to be very, very careful about watching, especially the elderly and all. So it was a very, a situation that was very, very tedious for us. And we learned a lot because I was under supervision of registered nurses and the doctors and all.
Okay, for the people who were farmers, the men, were they ever able to create gardens or anything?
This was something, you know, the older generation, they had been working so hard to take care of the family, doing the farm work and all that, and now they didn't have that. And it was just amazing that they started gardening either in flowers or vegetables, and also it was amazing how much talent that they had. And so many of the things that were made by the first generation Japanese are found in museums now of wonderful, wonderful artistic work and work that was done with scraps that they found even in camp at that time.
Furniture?
Well, I might say that we had no furniture, but we found out that the government had scrap lumber from building these barracks, and so we decided that maybe we could liberate some of this lumber, and so we went out and liberated this lumber and then made benches and chairs, and it was amazing, some of the carpentry work that was done. But I must admit, I went out with gangs at night, evenings too, to find this liberated lumber that we had used. And
I think that's what they call moonlight requisitioning.
oh, well, thank you for making it sound legitimate. But that was what we had done, you know. But it was just something that, and you know, here we were doing these things, but the people who had money, of course, they ordered things from Sears Roebuck and things like that.
So you could do that?
Yes, they could be sent into order. But then the people around our camps, their men and boys had gone to the war. Their crops were needing help, and so they asked if some of the people could go out of camp and work. They did. They became good friends with the community, and often came in with fresh vegetables and things like that.
That's nice.
And so that was
And
something
then
that.
you also had church services in the camp?
Yes, we did, and it was something that they discouraged Buddhism because they thought that it was being spoken in Japanese, and later on they said, okay, you can have your services. But like I said, first they just said the Christian churches, but it became very obvious that it was all, you know. But it was just something that accidents happened, you know, like you would in any other community, and people just had babies. Some fell in love, some died, you know. Mental health, as I said, deteriorated in some areas and all. But it was all, but we were denied our citizenship, and that was the biggest thing that to us was an insult, you know, for all that. And the government had reclassified the military age of people, and we were considered 4C, which meant that we were aliens, and enemy aliens at that time. But in 1943, the president asked for volunteers in the camp and said, prove your loyalty by volunteering for the military and all. And so, but they said it'll be an all Japanese American segregated unit, and that's how it was. And also needed Japanese language speaking people to help with military intelligence. And so that was how my brother Ted, who was working in the office, was able to go into the military again and serve as a machine gunner over in Europe at that time. And so that he did. My brother Ben went to military intelligence, volunteered from camp, and it was something that there was arguments. There's some who said that is wrong, you know, and they said, why fight for a country that has our parents behind barbed wire fence? And that was the argument that was given. And then they say, my mom was ridiculed. They said, here, you don't have a husband. You already have a son that's in the military to be killed. And another son is going out to get killed too. You know, it was just something that was scary in a way, because they were being very, very verbal about this. But bless my mom, you know, I love her for it. But anyway, she said, they are loyal American citizens. And she says, I'm so proud of them. And I thought, amen.
Yes, good for her.
Yeah, good for her, yes.
But not an easy thing to do.
But my brother Ben then, of course, he volunteered from camp. And this is a group that just from our camp that had volunteered for the military intelligence. And my brother Ben is right here.
Mm-hmm.
And he is written up in this American Patriots book and all. But he stayed in for 25 years, you can imagine, retired as a lieutenant colonel, and is now buried at Arlington Cemetery.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're very proud of that. But, and then of course, the group from Hawaii was here, and they were the 100th Battalion, and then the 442 over to Italy and the military intelligence. And it was so that these, in spite of all the prejudices that we went through, the patriotism, just like the rest of the fellow American citizens, like all of you and your families that had sent military personnel. No.
Grace, did they ever allow Japanese American soldiers to go to the Pacific War, to the war in the Pacific, or was it always just in Europe? Do you know?
No, the military intelligence went to the Pacific. That's why they were using the
Okay.
Japanese language to interpret, interrogate, and to...
But as far as soldiers, do you know?
Yes, and soldiers went to the Vietnam War and also the World War II. They were
Okay.
into the... Yeah, they fought as soldiers, not just for their...
Intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my brother, Min was, when he was going overseas in military intelligence, the war ended on a shipboard, you know. So he ended up in an office in Tokyo for a year and a half at that time. But
That must have been an interesting experience.
it was, and I was at the Army Hospital, you know. I was a cadet nurse because I had left camp to, I wanted to finish my nurse's training, but this, and they had given us a list of names of schools, but they would say, oh, we'd love to have you, but we don't feel that the community is ready for your kind of nurse. Or we'd love to have you at our school of nursing, but we don't feel that the patients are ready for your kind. And that was the type of response that we received. But fortunately, we wanted to get out of camp, and the only way we could get out of camp was FBI clearance, be accepted at a school, have a job, and we could never become a ward of any state. You know, and if you had a family or friend that would financially support you, you could. And since the schools wouldn't accept us, my former classmate, roommate, and I went out with a job. So we worked as a cook and housekeeper at Lake Forest, Illinois, and then we were accepted at St. Mary's School of Nursing as in the U.S. Cadet Nurse Corps program, which stipulation was that you had to stay in nursing, working until the war was over. And so we were under public health nursing at that time. And the last 6 months, you could specialize what you wanted to do, and obstetrics or surgery or anything. And since I had two brothers in the military, I asked if I could go to an Army hospital. And I was accepted at Chick General Clinton, Iowa, at the Army hospital there for my last 6 months of training. And it was not until about 15 years ago that I found out, and this was sent to me, that I was one of the first two second-generation women ever accepted as a senior cadet nurse of the Army Nurse Corps.
Let me just get
And all.
nice picture.
After I was out of the Army Nurse Corps, being there as a cadet nurse, the war ended while I was at the Army hospital. But so when I was finished with my nurse's training, I got my diploma and moved to Cleveland, Ohio, because my parents had, and my family had evacuated to Cleveland, Ohio, because my brother George had a job there. And so then I worked at the university hospitals there, and then came back from Japan for military intelligence work, and we were married in Cleveland. And then he did his graduate work at Ohio State, and so he was at Columbus, Ohio, and I worked at the Student Health Center, and he received his master's and doctorate. And after that, he worked for the USDA and was sent to Colorado, where we lived for 8 years, had 2 children. One son was profoundly mentally disadvantaged, but and he just passed away 8 years ago. But anyway, we were there for 8 years, and then Min was sent to Westlaco, Texas, to help set up a new soils lab there, and then he was sent to Iowa, Ames, Iowa, and with the USDA, and later became on the staff at Iowa State University as an extension agronomist. And so that's what he did till he retired. But
Is this your wedding? This is your wedding picture, isn't it? Yeah. Here we are.
this was done in Cleveland, Ohio, at the old stone church.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. This was done in Cleveland, Ohio.
Uh-huh.
But
What year was that?
1947, September 6th.
December 6th.
But anyway, so this is the way it was. And well, when you think about it, this was the first mass evacuation in the history of the United States of America. No precedent, no guidelines at all, and never before 10 cities populated by citizens who were and were not prisoners, who did not have their civil rights, who were unhappy, disillusioned. Some were bitter, but remarkably were determined to make the best of what it had held. And so slowly we went back into the mainstream, and this is how we were able to get back as citizens of the country at that time. And so it was that the West Coast was later opened for relocation, and that's the way it was. But some of the countries, there was one town that even erased the name of Japanese American soldiers off their American Legions list.
Can you tell about your mother getting her citizenship?
Yes, I can. We were denied our citizenship, and after we were in Cleveland, and this is a newspaper article that was in 1969, that at the age of 80, my mother was one of the Japanese women who went to English class so that they could pass their American citizenship. And so she became an American citizen in 1969.
Must have been a very proud day for her.
The women were just so proud. We were all so proud of them because it was their dream to become U.S.
Yeah.
citizens at that time. But anyway, and so it was that it was interesting. We were incarcerated, charged with no crime, and United States-born citizens not proven guilty in any court of law. But the stroke of the pen, Franklin Delano Roosevelt took us away from our homes and stripped us of our freedom and all. And so we were subjected to military law. But this incarceration was truly an insult to our constitutional liberties. And it was something we were charged with only one crime, being born American citizens of Japanese descent, with Oriental features and living in the wrong part of the United States. America, acknowledged as a world leader of civil and human rights, selectively suspended the Bill of Rights. So you might say incarceration, yes, incarceration in a concentration camp in America, yes, but may it never, never happen to any other group of American citizens. And may our experience an example of one of the most disgraceful incidents of the government's history never repeated. But when you think then things like 9/11 happened, and then there they are again with the Muslims and the Arab Americans, and it's hard to consider because you know what kind of sorrow these people have been going through. Because racial profiling, racial discrimination can be so devastating and hurtful for all. And so, but it took 48 years after internment, but a redress and apology was made. And I might say that this was done in October of 1990, 48 years later. But if you had been in camp and had died by 1990, you did not get an apology, you did not get restitution. And so this is the way it was. And the question is often asked, though, as we talk about it, and we do these presentations hoping that we get through as an educational thing. And question is asked often says, we have never showed any bitterness about what had happened to us. And, one has to forgive for any wrongdoing that you have no control over. And all you're doing is ruining your own self by harboring bitterness in your life. And so this is the thing that we have to have a very positive outlook, be forgiving, and live as good American citizens and all. And so hopefully, we will become better understanding citizens and all. And so there we are. We hope that this helps the public realize that you want to be treated and treat others the same way. And until that, they did give us a restitution of $20,000 per person, along with our apology. But as I said, those who had died, who had been in camp but died by that, were not given that restitution.
Yes, and this document was signed by George Bush.
Yes, it was.
Yes, in October.
Do you have time to read it? Or would you? Yeah. Okay. This says, this is White House, Washington. It says, a monetary sum and words alone cannot restore lost years or erase painful memories. Neither can they fully convey our nation's resolve to rectify injustice and to uphold the rights of individuals. We can never fully right the wrongs of the past, but we can take a clear stand for justice and recognize the serious injustices were done to the Japanese Americans during World War II. In enacting a law calling for restitution and offering a sincere apology, your fellow Americans have, in a real sense, renewed their traditional commitments to the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice. You and your family have our best wishes for the future. Sincerely, George Bush, President of the United States, October 1990. And so that is it. with restitution.
Well, Grace, that was absolutely wonderful.
And so,
We thank you so much.
Yeah.
We wish we had more time.
well, you're through with the thing.
You ready? Okay. Lastly, Grace, we'd like to have you have a chance to kind of explain some of the awards you've been given. You have done so many talks. You're giving about 30 a year, is that right,
Over
to
30
schools
a year.
and so on through Iowa and around. And everyone just enjoys it so much. We'd like to have you have a chance to tell us about some of the awards you've received, if you would, please.
Well, I feel truly honored that and humbly honored to receive the awards that I've been given, but I have been going around to schools, organizations, and churches, and any group that would ask for a program and all. And of course, I had the privilege of getting an honorary degree from the University of California in 2009, and the School of Nursing had asked if I would come and speak to the Board of Regents and speak on behalf of the over 700 Japanese American students that were on the 4 campuses in Berkeley. And so I just feel that now I have my degree. But this is something that, like I said, we had a profoundly mentally disadvantaged son. Special Olympics and volunteering for their programs and all have been one of my husband and our really needs for us too, because we felt that we learned so much and hoped that we made ourselves better citizens by the things that we had done for whatever we did. And it was just something that with the human relations and also doing things for the Japanese American groups and the other groups and the YWCA and all, and on my 90th birthday last year, thanks to the American Historical Society for their wonderful award at that time.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with you. We do appreciate it.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and like I say, I hope that it will never happen to any other group.
Right. Again,
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.